Hello! So recently I was playing Cuphead and I thought to myself, hey, this game would be a lot less enjoyable if we couldn't move. Why did I have this idea? But first, let's set the rules for this challenge. Moving our character around by using the left and right inputs is not allowed. And that's basically the only rule. Everything else is allowed. We can jump, crouch, and we can also dash, which will basically be our only actual movement option. We can also change the direction we're facing by crouching, because it prevents the character from moving. However, that does mean that we cannot change directions mid-air, because that would make our character move. And finally, if we do accidentally move in a level, we will have to retry it. Alright, now that the rules are set, we skip the intro, and let's get going. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention we're also allowed to move outside of levels, for obvious reasons. Anyway, we go towards the first level, and the first thing we do is talking to this friendly guy which gives us 3 coins, and we're immediately going to use them to buy the most useful item in this challenge, the Cloud Dash. Since our movement options are very limited, being able to dash through enemies without taking damage is going to be extremely useful throughout the run. So we equip it, and we start by doing the first run and gun level, which is supposed to be the easiest level in the game. It took me an hour. The big problem in this level is that we will have to cross some gaps, but the dash is not a very precise movement option, and a bad setup can make some jumps impossible. So first we have to find a consistent setup, and after a lot of time, this is what I came up with. At the beginning of the level, we dash forward until we hit this log. Then we dash towards this platform to grab the coin, and this platform is going to be extremely useful, because since it moves from left to right, it's going to allow us to precisely readjust our position. And the most consistent setup I found was to perfectly line up the edge of our left shoe with the edge of this log. This precise positioning allows us to avoid the gaps, grab the coins, and even jump on those spike balls to build up our super. However, we start having an issue here, where the spike ball is out of reach, preventing us from reaching this coin. But thankfully, there's a solution. Yup. By using the pea shooter's charged attack, we can slightly push our character backwards, allowing us to grab the coin. And this is why we've been building up the super on those spike balls. After that, we have to take damage to cross this gap. And then we reach this other gap, where we can use the pea shooter's charge attack again to readjust our positioning and cross this gap safely. And we get to a platforming part, where we use the charged attack again to reposition a few times, grab the last coin, and we finish the level. Alright, now we have 5 coins, which is going to allow us to buy an important weapon. But we're only going to need it for the second island, so before buying it, let's fight some bosses. The first boss was the vegetable guys, and this one was terribly easy. The potato just requires you to jump above the attacks, the onion tears can be avoided by just dashing left and right, and the carrot was a little bit harder, but still nothing too bad, we just had to dash around a little bit. The second boss was the Super Boxing Brothers. The flames on the first phase might look a bit annoying, but you can pop most of them by simply jumping, and the punches are also very easy to avoid. Then for the second phase, we can just dash forward while the big guy pushes us back. It looks very goofy, but it works very well. And the last phase is when things can get annoying, because the attacks it uses are randomly chosen, and some of them are a bit complicated. Thankfully though, I got the easiest attack twice in a row on my second attempt, so it wasn't really an issue. Then we have to find the boxing ball. The first phase is very straightforward, just dash away and hit him. The second phase though is a bit more annoying than it looks, because this guy's hitbox is so big that we can't dash through him without taking damage, so we'll have to hope for good RNG with his movements. And then the last phase isn't too bad. We jump around to hit the head and dash away when the grave is about to fall. After that, I decided to try the mausoleum to unlock the first super, and that was actually pretty hard. Since we can't freely move around, switching between left and right to hit the ghosts quickly gets overwhelming, and if we get bad RNG, there's not really much we can do. But after a few minutes of trying, we get a good run and we unlock the first super. Alright, now it's time to deal with the flower, and that boss was a lot harder than the two previous ones. On the first phase, we dash against the left edge of the screen so that we can line up with the last platform. However, at this point, this is the only platform we can land on, so we'll have to alternate between this platform and the ground. When seeds start falling from the sky, the left side of the screen is pretty safe. Then we use a charged attack behind us to push the character a little bit forward, allowing us to land on the second platform. And we move on to the last phase, where we can just move between the two last platforms until the boss dies. And now it's time for the first airplane level, so we enter the tutorial. We're gonna have a problem. Yeah. In airplane levels, we don't have a dash, and we don't have a jump either, so we have absolutely no way of moving without using the directional inputs. And not moving at all obviously makes those levels completely impossible. So at first glance, it might look like we're hitting a wall. However, let me remind you the exact wording of the rules real quick. Moving our character around by using the left and right inputs is not allowed. Yup, that means we're not allowed to use left and right for movement, but up and down are allowed. For regular levels it doesn't make a difference, but for airplane levels, this means we will be able to change our height, but we still don't have any way of moving horizontally, which is going to be problematic sometimes. Anyway, we skip the tutorial to open up the path, and now it's time to fight the boss. The first phase is pretty straightforward. We move up and down while shooting at the boss, and we dodge the few attacks coming our way. The second phase is basically the same thing, just with a sheep instead. But where we start having troubles is when she transforms a second time. She can randomly choose to transform into Gemini or Sagittarius. And I hate Sagittarius, so we'll talk about Gemini. The problem with this phase is that she spawns a yellow ball that shoots around in a full circle, which means that we normally can't dodge it. And that's where we can use our first trick to tank unavoidable damage, the super, which allows us to tank a hit without losing any health. However, it takes time to build up, and with this defensive strategy, she will always have time to spawn a second ball. But thankfully, we have another trick up our sleeves. Wait, what? Let me explain. When you shrink, your character's hitbox kind of disappears for a few frames, so if you move towards a small projectile and perfectly time your shrink, you can sometimes pass through the projectile without getting hit. The timing is very tight though, and it doesn't work with every projectile. But here it allows us to not get hit. After that, we build up our super while she transforms into the third phase, and we use a charged attack right as she transforms to deal a lot of damage. But now, this is where it gets really bad. Those UFOs have two shooting patterns, an early one where we can just sneak through, and a late one where we absolutely cannot do anything. And of course, the pattern is completely random. So we will use our super to tank one of them, with the invulnerability frames allowing us to avoid a second one, and then we just have to pray for some of the next UFOs to be dodgeable, and thankfully, after face tanking one of them, we get lucky with the last UFO, and we manage to knock out the boss before the next UFO kills us. And this was by far the hardest boss on the first island. Now we can move to the next island, but before that I said we would need another weapon for the second island. So we go to the shop and we buy this extremely useful weapon, the Chaser. Since we can't turn around in midair, there's a lot of phases where we would have to choose between dodging or attacking, but thanks to the chaser, we can do both at the same time. It has a really low damage output though, but it's still going to be very useful. Alright, now we can really move to the second island, and this was a big step up in difficulty.
Especially one of them.
Anyway, we start this island with the candy boss. In the first phase, she throws a random mini-boss. Here we get the candy machine, which is definitely the worst one. The pattern is very random, and if you get unlucky, it's hard to not get hit. Then the... whatever this is supposed to be, this one's pretty easy. Just dash through it when it goes towards you, and you're good to go. And then we have the... candy... rock... something. This one requires a bit of baiting around by jumping, dashing, and falling from platforms, but when you get the timing down, it's not too bad. Then we reach the last phase, and it was definitely the hardest one. We jump on this little platform to deal damage with the pea shooter, but dodging the auto-targeting head and the pasty menthols while simultaneously trying to land on a moving platform with just dashes and jumps was not easy. But after a bunch of dodging around and using our super at the right moment, we beat the boss. Alright, now we move on to the bird, and despite being an airplane level, this one was surprisingly easy. The first phase just requires moving up and down with barely anything to dodge, and the next attack is just some micro adjustments up and down to avoid the feathers. The second phase is a bit more annoying though. Depending on how the boss moves, it can sometimes be next to impossible to dodge its floating eggs, but overall it's not too bad. Then for the third phase, we will switch to the other weapons so we can hit it while staying high up, and after using our super to dodge an otherwise fatal bullet, we knock out the boss in literally one attempt. After that, I decided to attempt the second mausoleum to unlock the invincibility super, and this was basically a worse version of the first one, with more ghosts and even a new type of ghost, and if we get bad luck, a lot of the patterns were simply impossible. But after bullying my spacebar for long enough, we managed to rescue Miss Chalice again, and we unlocked the second super. And now, let's not use this new super because we're going to do another airplane level. And unlike the previous one, that one was tough. On the first phase, the boss will randomly choose between 3 different attacks. The first one is the sword attack, which is basically impossible to dodge. The second one is the cat attack, which is almost impossible to dodge. And the third one is the jewelry attack, which is the only one we can really dodge. And yes, that means we will have to reset every time we get the wrong attack, which is 2 out of 3 times. Thankfully it's the very first attack, so resetting doesn't take too long. After that, we move on to the second attack, and while it might look a bit complicated to maneuver around those blades without being able to move horizontally, it was actually pretty easy. Then we move on to the next phase, and here, if we time a charged attack right as the boss does this animation, we can deal a ton of damage to it. And by following it up with 2 more charged attacks, we can finish this phase in just a few seconds. And now the next phase is quite annoying. First we will move upwards to bait the hat into a good position. Then we move under it to hit the boss, and we will have to dodge both the hat's and the boss's attacks. But the real problem here is that the hat sometimes shoots a bullet at an angle that forces us to perfect shrink it, which I failed to do here. Then I completely waste my super out of panic, and we move on to the last phase. And there is some sort of a safe spot from the pyramids on the top left corner, so we will have to bait the lasers from the boss a bit lower, and then hide on the top left to stay relatively safe. If the pyramids decide to shoot at this angle though, we'll have to tank the hit, so that's another layer of RNG. But after enough attempts, we get a good run and knock out the boss with 1 HP left. Alright, now let's move on to the next boss, the clown. The first phase is quite simple, just dash against the wall, wait for the clown to dash, and jump above him when he does, while making sure we don't get hit by the ducks. The second phase is much harder though. We will have to hit the boss while dodging the balloons, jumping on the train, and dodging the passengers simultaneously, so we will have to do a lot of little hops to readjust our positioning, while also dodging the balloons. Then the next phase looks hard, but it's actually not that bad. We can just stay on the left on the screen, and if the boss is on the right, we dodge the attacks normally, and if he goes on the left, we can sneak under him and perfectly time a dash to dodge the passengers, while being completely safe from his attacks. And then we move on to the last phase. After a few seconds of hitting the boss, a train will come towards us, so we jump to a platform, which I failed to do. After that, the boss will spawn a bunch of puppets, and we use the laser super to quickly get rid of most of them. Then we don't fail the jump on the platforms this time to avoid the next train, and we run on the left to avoid most of the puppets, although we still get hit. And after that, we knock out the boss with our remaining charged attacks. It might not seem like it from the video footage, but this was actually the hardest boss so far. Keyword so far. Because now it's time to deal with this big boy, which took a little bit of time. Just a little. Anyway, I tried fighting him for about an hour with our current equipment, but the combo of pea shooter and chaser just doesn't cut it on the last phase, so we will have to farm some coins for a new weapon. And the run and gun levels are still a nightmare, so after an hour and a half of tinkering, I found a way to get a few coins. We start the level by dashing forward, and we need to farm those pink ladybugs to build up 4 charged attacks. Also, this coin up here is possible to obtain, but it's very random, so I decided to skip it. After building up enough super, we use 3 charged attacks to get past this gap, and 1 more to get past this one. Then we equip the chaser, we grab this coin on the right, and we let the bottom log alive to build up a charged attack. Then we let the chaser do its job, and after some platforming we reach the next coin. Here we dash against this wall to align properly, and we use 1 charged attack on this platform to grab the coin. But now we have a problem. This gap is just impossible to cross without moving, so what can we do? Yup. By baiting the camera upwards, we can take void damage, allowing us to reset our dash and move to the next platform. Then we align against the wall again, break those trees, and here we use the moving platform to position precisely. We skip this coin up here because we literally can't get it, and after a bit of scary platforming consisting of dashing and short hopping on moving platform to adjust our position, we slide under here to grab the last coin, barely land on this platform, and we reach the final mini-boss of this level. And since we're big fighters ready to brawl at any moment, we're just going to pop the invincible super and skip it. Anyway, now we have enough coins to buy a new weapon, and because I'm very dumb, I thought that the roundabout would be a good idea, so that we don't have to turn around on the last phase. However, I quickly realized it was not good enough, so that was a waste of coins. Thankfully though, this other run and gun level was surprisingly easy. The treadmills made the platforming trivial and the mini-boss was fine, so in less than 7 minutes, we got enough gold for another weapon. And this time I turned on my brain before spending the coins. Let's think about it. Out of the options we have here, what do you think would be a good weapon to kill a dragon? That's right, balloons. Since we're basically above the boss for the entirety of the fight, the shooting angle paired with the great damage of the balloons makes it an excellent choice, as well as being good at avoiding breaking the fireballs on the last phase. Alright, now that we have the equipment ready, it's time to finally fight the dragon. Which still took me 2 hours, by the way. The first phase always starts with the same cloud pattern, so we immediately jump dash on this cloud and parry the pink circle to get 1 charged attack. Then the cloud patterns will start being random, and the dragon will start shooting fireballs and trying to hit us with its tail. To avoid it, we'll have to do a bunch of short hops and dashing from cloud to cloud. But sometimes there's just nothing we can do because the clouds decide to not cooperate. Then we have the second phase. Here we will have to dodge the flames while dashing on the clouds, and we will have to quickly alternate the direction we're facing a lot in order to deal damage with the lobber while still dodging the flames. Once again, the cloud RNG can get in our way, and some patterns are almost unavoidable. After that, we have the last phase, which is by far the hardest, even though the previous ones were not easy either. Here, the dragon will alternate between two attacks. In the first one, it shoots bubbles of fire that explode if they get hit, which makes the chaser basically unusable, so we will have to entirely rely on the lobber. That means we will constantly have to quickly switch the direction we're facing to dodge the fireballs and hit the boss simultaneously. And when you have to switch directions so fast and so often, a tiny misinput can easily turn into accidental movement, forcing us to retry. And I also accidentally dropped from clouds way too often. Then for the second attack, the dragon head in the middle will shoot fire through the whole screen, forcing us to stay on the highest clouds. And since it limits our cloud options a lot, the odds of not having any clouds to dash to are quite high, making it impossible to dodge sometimes. And that's about it for the strategy, but even after all of that, it still took me a long time to defeat it, so it's time for a quick montage.
Finally!
That was by far the hardest boss in the challenge. But now that we're done with him, we can move to the last island. And the first boss we fight is the pirate. And after all the experience I got from fighting the dragon, this fight was trivial. The first phase is just some dashing left and right to avoid the barrel and the peas, the shark can easily be avoided, the cannonballs just require a little jump, and we don't even need to dodge the squid because it doesn't deal damage, it just blinds the screen. And then we already reached the last phase where we hug the left border to dodge the fireballs, and for some reason I just stood here and tanked it. Then we crouch for the laser, and after 3 charged attacks, we beat the boss. Now if you think that every boss from now on is going to be that easy, the Calamaria is here to prove you wrong. In the first phase, Calamaria will throw a random sea creature at us and start shooting with a fish cannon. She has 2 different cannons and 3 different creatures, creating a lot of possible combos. Her first weapon is the red fish, which shoots a bunch of projectiles. It's the easiest one to dodge, although it can be a bit annoying if it's paired with the seahorse. Her second weapon is the yellow fish, which will throw towards us an auto-aiming dolphin. The only way to dodge it is to perform a perfectly timed shrink, which is hard to do. And on top of that, we also have the sea creatures attacking us. The first one is the turtle, which is the easiest one. It shoots projectiles and we have to dodge. That's about it. The second one is the seahorse, and most of the time it's pretty easy, unless she decides to throw a dolphin at us, in which case it's basically impossible to dodge. And the third ones are the pufferfish. The only way we have to dodge the pufferfish on the left side is to perfect shrink through them, and there can be multiple of them in a row. And we have to also dodge whatever garbage the boss throws at us simultaneously. She also throws some ghosts in between the fish attacks, which can range from trivial to impossible, depending on the sea creatures. So to recap, the first phase is basically RNG hell, with a lot of perfect shrinks. Alright, now that everything is explained, let's play the actual run. The fight starts with a combo of pufferfish and ghosts, and we get hit trying to perfect shrink. Then we have a combo of redfish and turtle, which is one of the easiest, so we get a lot of free damage. After that, we get a combo of seahorse and ghosts, which is also very easy, and thanks to the good RNG, we reach the second phase. Here, the boss will summon eels to shoot at us, and she will periodically Cassiopeia ult us, and we get hit after being stunned. This phase is a bit annoying, but it's pretty short, so we quickly reach the last phase. And once again, this phase has a lot of RNG. There is nothing we can do to avoid the stuns, and the obstacles are somewhat random, so we just have to mash and pray. Yes! Alright, now we move on to the theater, and this fight was a lot easier. On the first phase, she will jump around and diagonal kick the ground, so the safest spot is literally in front of her. Then she reappears from the left, where we can deal some nice initial damage, and then she will start throwing little mouse cars while babies throw milk bottles at us. Wait, that's kinda weird. Anyway, all this takes is a bit of jumping and dashing around to avoid everything, and we move on to the third phase. Here she throws a meteor that we destroy, and then a random guy in a cheap cosplay runs towards us, which we just dashed through. Then lightning bolts will start falling from the sky, which we can easily avoid by dashing left and right. After that, we have the last phase, and an umbrella will fall from the sky to auto-target us. Originally, I thought it would be a nightmare, but with the right timing, we can just dash back and forth through the umbrella while the chaser does its job. And after a while, we defeat her. Okay, now it's time for the bee fight, and it was really hard. Similarly to the clouds in the dragon fight, the platforms have a lot of RNG to them, making it complicated sometimes. Anyway, the first phase is pretty easy, just go to the left and shoot at the beekeeper. Then we reach the second phase and the bee has a bunch of different attacks. Here she falls in the middle and shoots bullets. There's a safe spot against the left wall, so it's an easy phase. As long as we get platforms, of course, but this time it was fine. Then she will start summoning pink balls, which we will have to bait around by falling from platforms and dashing around them. However, we have a bit of a platform shortage here, so there's not much we can do. After that, she spawns a triangle on top of us that shoots some projectiles, which is not too bad to dodge if we have platforms to play around with. Then she does her middle attack again because I didn't deal enough damage, and after that she moves on to her last phase. And while she's in this animation, we can deal a lot of damage to her if we have platforms on the top, making the last phase shorter. And talking about the last phase, it's basically just dodging hell. It can quickly get overwhelming with the weird movements of the gauntlets and the sparse platforms, and of course there's a bunch of platform RNG on top of it. But since we dealt a lot of damage before the phase even started, we managed to knock out the bee before she even does her soul blade attack. Alright, now we do the last airplane level in this island. Dr. Dr. Cole's robot. In the first phase we have 3 different parts to deal with, and if we don't keep up properly, we can quickly get overwhelmed. The most annoying part is the lamp, so as soon as the level starts, we rush to the lamp to deal some damage to it. After it targets us, we move down to deal with the spawning missiles and also bait the next laser down, allowing us to parry the barrier on the way and destroy the lamp. Next, we take care of the plate, and after we destroy it, we will have to be very careful to break those missiles early, otherwise we won't be able to dodge them. Now we deal with the heart, and the boss decides to do a bit of trolling by using the one attack that forces me to get hit. After that, the boss throws its head, and we use our super to quickly deal with it as it comes back, and move on to the last phase. Then the last phase is basically just a long surviving part of micro-dodging through the Chaos Emeralds, and after surviving for a while, we manage to knock out the boss. Then we have the Skull Train, and that one requires a bit of strategizing. Bricks are going to periodically fall from the sky, and that can easily offset our positioning to a near unrecoverable state. But thankfully there's a little trick we can use to avoid that. If we parry the opposite wheel just before the brick touches the other one, it will prevent the cart from moving. This only works when we're against an edge though, so we'll try to stay there as much as possible. The first phase is pretty straightforward. We literally just stand there and we shoot at the ghost, and it should also destroy the eyeballs on the way. But the next phase is where it gets tough. I let the pumpkin move the platform to the middle because the skeleton always spawns there at first, and then I use one charged attack to reposition so I can hit him. After that we have to stay against an edge, and with 2 well-timed cloud dashes we can avoid the skeleton hands while hitting the skull with the chaser. We also want the cart to stay against the edge, so we'll have to keep an eye on pumpkins and prevent them from moving the cart. And after a good while of dodging and dealing miserable damage with the chaser, we move on to the next phase. Here we have to stay against the edge once again and focus one of the heads to basically remove the need for dodging. We also have a safe spot from this attack if we hug the edge. Then we hit the other one safely with our chaser, and the only thing we have to be careful about is to not move the cart with the skulls. After that we use 2 charged attacks to move the cart all the way to the left, and move on to the last phase. Here we have to parry the train's tail and hit it while avoiding the fireballs and the rings. And after dodging for a while, we manage to beat this boss without taking a single hit. And now it's time for the last boss of this island, the cat. In the first phase we move all the way to the left and jump above the bomb's explosions while hitting the can, which oddly reminds me of my old microphone. Then we dash through the boss as it runs towards us, and we get to the next phase. Here it's just a matter of praying for good RNG. If the phase decides to troll us, there's not much we can do. But thankfully here the platforms were pretty good, and we pop our super to avoid the last attack. Then the boss gets eaten by a big cat, and honestly there's not much to say here, we just dash left and right to dodge the balls, and we quickly get rid of the boss. That was the easiest one we've had in a while. And that's it for the third island, but before moving to King Dice I tried to do the mausoleum to unlock the last super, but I quickly realized that it would just be completely impossible without moving. Thankfully we don't need to do it to fight King Dice, so we just skip it and go to hell. That's the name of the place. Anyway, we start the fight against King Dice, and we're quickly going to run into an issue. Some of those boss are gonna be complicated. Mr. Wheezy has an uncrossable gap, Fearlap has undodgeable attacks, and Mr. Chimes... yeah. But thankfully there's a way to avoid this problem, and for this we need to know an important detail about this boss. The encounters are not random. Instead, each tile will always give the same boss. And since we can always get the number we want by parrying the dice at the right moment, we can plan a route in advance. So first we retry the fight until the hard bonuses line up with the correct bosses, and we will have to fight a minimum of 3 of them. The first one we want is the Cowboy Pile of Coins, I guess? And he is terribly easy. All we need to do is shoot and dash through him when he moves. That's it. Then the third one we want is Miss Piroletta, and she is terribly easy. All we need to do is shoot and dash through her when she moves. That's it. Now, you probably noticed I skipped straight from 1 to 3, and that's because the only annoying mini-boss was the second one, the Rabbit Magician. This mini-boss has 2 attacks. The first attack spawns a circle of skulls around us, and all we need to do is dash through it. The annoying attack is the second one though. It spawns a line of projectiles that goes up or down. When it spawns from the top, we can use the dash's invincibility frames to avoid the hit, but when it spawns from the bottom, it's a bit more complicated, and because of that, we tank 2 hits on this fight. And since we got an extra heart on Piroletta, we have 4 hearts now, and it's time to actually fight King Dice himself. King Dice's only attack is throwing an army of cards in a line, and since we can only dash once in the air, it's basically impossible to dodge it. So we will have to tank a hit every time, and that's why we built up some health by doing the easy bosses. We avoid the first line of card by using the super, then we tank the 2 next ones, and after a good old charged attack, we manage to knock him out with 2 HP left. Honestly, I expected this fight to be hard, but it was surprisingly easy. But now it's finally time for the very last boss of the game, the Devil. And I remembered from my first playthrough that the spread is a very good weapon against him. But for that, we would need some gold. Yeah, it's time for another run and gun level. Out of the remaining options, the best level I found was the Circus. And here we're going to have a big part with multiple gaps we normally can't cross, so we'll have to play in a very specific way. Also, an interesting game mechanic that's going to be very useful here is that if you dash towards a small wall and then jump towards the ledge, Cuphead is going to snap to the ledge without requiring movement inputs. So with this new knowledge, we start the level, and to get past the first gap we will need our super. So after dashing a few times and using this trampoline, we snap to the sledge here and build our super on the pink balloons. The cool thing here is that pink balloons will keep reappearing as long as we're in this section, allowing us to max out our super. Oh, and we also grab these 2 coins on the way. After that, we reach the gaps, so we use our super here to get past the first 2 gaps and grab another coin. Then we tank a hit to cross the next gap, leaving us with 2 HP. We grab another coin on the way, and now we need to defeat this mini-boss. Wow, that was hard, forget about the dragon, this guy was the real deal. Anyway, after defeating the mini-boss, we dash against this wall to line up with the platforms, and then it's time for an epic parkour course, where we will have to maneuver around the endless amounts of mustard and ketchup being thrown at us by none other than the evil hot dog queen and her trusty jumping pretzels. And after a long and ruthless battle, we manage to defeat her, and after 3 charge attacks and 1 final dash, we emerge victorious and restore order in the circus. Anyway, now we can buy the spread. And now that we're ready, it's time to kick the devil out of his throne. In the first phase, he will alternate between a bunch of different attacks, but first we start the fight by dashing against the left edge to line up with the devil's head, and we'll constantly have to jump to deal as much damage as possible. Then he does his Spirit's attack, where we bait the souls to the right so we can dash through them afterwards. He follows it up with the clapping attack, which we can avoid by jumping and dashing at the right moment. We deal some great damage here, and then he does the snake attack, which is very easy, just go to the edge. And after another clap, he does my favorite attack, the crystal balls. I like this attack because we can quickly alternate between dodging the balls and dealing some damage on the way, and after doing this for the whole duration of the attack, he drops his costume and moves on to the second phase. Here, flaming circles will fall from the sky while the devil alternates between 2 attacks. For the spinning axe, we kinda have to just improvise and dash from one platform to another to try to avoid it. As for the bomb, we could parry it to destroy it, but I prefer just dashing away from it. After this, the 2 platforms on the edge will fall, forcing us to stay on 3 small platforms, and we directly go to the one on the right to quickly deal with the big flying purple bear with gloves and elephant legs? Then we go to the middle and deal some big damage to the devil while failing to dodge the birds, if you can call that a bird. After a short amount of time, the purple bear on the right respawns, but since the platform in the middle decided to cooperate, we quickly finish this phase with little trouble. And that's it. We watch the devil cry like an onion, and after dealing the final blow, we beat Cuphead without ever moving. Oh wait, there's a DLC? Can I get platforms? What?